good afternoon, learners, and a great welcome, a warm welcome back to our English first additional language lessons by Miss Lituri. And on today's lesson, we're going to focus primarily on how to approach a literary text. In most cases in paper 2, I know that a lot of you are doing different genres, right? Others are doing novels, others are doing short stories and poetry and so forth. But I believe that the structure is the same, where you are all given, be it you're doing a novel or you're doing short stories, you will be given an extract, which is a literary text based on the literature or the genre that is administered at your respective schools. So you will be given an extract. So you need to know the correct approach, and the correct methods and the correct skills in order to approach a literary text. But remember that when you are examined based on literature, not all the answers will be based on the extract itself, right? So it means that you need to understand all the short stories first, or you need to understand the novel first before you can even attempt to understand a certain extract. Because remember, an extract is just being exempted from, it's just a small portion of the plot, the plot of the short story or the plot of the novel, right? Just a brief definition that literature actually means it's a books or writings published on a particular subject. And then also it is important to differentiate between a fiction and a non-fiction, meaning that fiction, it will be something that is not based on the truth, something that is just created, not based on factual evidence, but then non-fiction stories that are based on the truth. So you must be in a position to thoroughly, if not explicitly, understand and differentiate between the two. And then also, when given a story, be it you're reading Macbeth or you're reading Cry the Beloved Country, or you're reading, it might be To Kill a Mockingbird, even I'm also referencing those genres that may be outside first additional language. Some are pertaining to home language, but I'm not going to go into home language aspects. I'm going to deal only with a first additional language concepts, right? It is important when you read a story to understand the voice of the narrator. Remember, a narrator, it will be somebody who tells the story. To narrate, it means to tell a story. So it is important to distinguish the voice that is being used. We've got the first narrator voice, we've got the second narrator voice, we've got the third narrator voice. What are the differences amongst the three? The first narrator uses the word I and we. It means that the writer himself or herself is involved in the story. So therefore, he's narrating the story from his personal point of view, right? So he is part of the plot, he is part of the story. So the first narrator, when you're reading a short story using the first personal pronoun I, you know that actually the story is being narrated from the first voice. And then we also have the second narrator. Now, the second narrator is when the reader becomes the main character in the story, and then they use the second personal pronoun you. So that will be the second voice. And then the third narrator voice now. The narrator now exists outside the story. It means that he is an observer and he's telling story on others' behalf, right? So therefore you use pronouns such as they, him, she, them. These are just a few examples. So you must be in a position to determine the voice that is being used to narrate that short story, or the voice that is being used to narrate that it might be a novel as well, right? And then now, what is important also is to, before you can even go into, remember the main topic of today. I'm just giving out a background first. The main topic of today is how to approach a literary text. But it is important to also not to forget the fundamental components, if not basic concepts that build or that helps one to further understand the literary work or the literature work. It is important to also understand the plot. The plot, it means sequence of events. How are the events unfolding in the story, right? In other books, we find that the beginning of the book is the end of the book, where the plot, where the story started, it's going to end almost in the same way. So we refer to such literary work as the beginning of the book being the end of the book. So as a reader, it's important to understand how the plot is, the sequence of events and how they unfold in the novel or in the short story. It is also important to determine the setting, because the setting, remember, it gives us the atmosphere, it gives us also the background, culture, and so forth. If for example, Cry the Beloved Country is centered around South Africa during the period of apartheid, so it is easier as a reader already, you know what to expect, you know the setting, you know the culture of South Africa at that time, you know the environment of South Africa at that time. So the plot, it means it's the place or location where action or where the plot is going to do what, to unfold. And then sometimes you find that a book, like even in Cry the Beloved Country, which is a novel, the writer takes us to different or various places within the context of South Africa. So also when, and as and when the plot changes, pardon me, as and when the setting changes, also you would also recognize how the atmosphere change. For example, if you move from Johannesburg to Ikobo, Ikobo is a rural area, right? And then now you move into the epicenter of South Africa, which is Johannesburg. At that time, it was regarded as a melting pot of South Africa. You will realize that as in when we move and we change the setting, the atmosphere of the plot also changes pertaining to or regarding or as a response to the changing of the setup. So it is important as a reader that when you read, you must take note of how the locations are changing, or maybe the story may be centered around only a particular area, right? Then there's no need a particular area. It doesn't, and that means that where the plot is centered, it's only in one area. So the area, if not the importance of the setting, is to give us the atmosphere. What kind of a place are we talking about? Is to also give us the kind of people who are existing in that place. It is also give us the sense of beliefs of those people at that time, the culture of the people in that area. So it is important not just to know the name of the setting, but to also understand the significance of the setting towards understanding of the general idea of the plot. I've also talked about narration when I started the video, so I'm not going to talk about narration anymore because I explained the first voice, the second voice, and the third voice narrator. And then characterization. Remember, without a character, we don't have a story, right? Without a character, we cannot have a story. So it's important to assess and check how the writer is presenting characters in the story or in the short, or maybe it might be in the novel. You check how they describe their appearance, their diction, voices, and how their choice of words will give you a clear picture of what kind of a person is this one. So it means that when you interact with literature, you need to have what you call critical reading. You don't just read to finish the book or to finish the story. You must interrogate the manner in which the linguistic styles that are used by different or various authors to present the characters to you. After reading, be it a short story or a novel, you should be in a position to tell us, but this character, I think he's very mean. I think he's very sarcastic. I think he's very compassionate. But then you must be able to give us evidence as to why you say this character is compassionate. Why do you say this character is angry? You rely heavily on how the how the author present those characters to you. And also, we also learn about characters through what other characters are saying about them. Typically, let's just put it in a layman's term. Even us as human beings in our interactions, at times you may not know a certain individual, but you may get to know them through what others are saying about them. So it's the same concept that I'm actually alluding here, that it is important to also check how other characters are presenting other characters in the novel or in the short story. Then you should be in a position to describe those characters using evidence from the short story or novel. Now, when we talk about symbol, I think as in when we continue with our video, I'm going to have an example of a literary text, and I'll show you what you mean by symbol. Objects can act as a symbol or symbolism. For an example, in Cry the Beloved Country, we have a money that was saved in a tin. So that tin serves as a symbol. What does it symbolize? It symbolizes the olden method of living, and it shows that those people are really, really in the deep rural area. Now we are talking about modernization, where we are saving money in the bank. But in the novel Cry the Beloved Country, we have Reverend Stephen Khumalo and his wife saving money in a cocoa tin, right? So that tin is a symbol. It serves to symbolize an olden method, if not a non-modernized way of living, right? So symbol, it may also pertain to objects that are used in the story. If the writer describes the house, or the writer talks about maybe a South African flag, any tool or object that can be used to serve or to symbolize something. I hope I managed to explain it clearly. And then also metaphor. Characters can be compared to things, and places can be compared to things. Remember, metaphor is all about comparison, right? And then other concepts that are important in understanding the story, before you can even go into the nitty-gritties of the story itself. Also understand the historical context. I've said earlier on that the novel Cry the Beloved Country is centered in South Africa, but the era in which the book was written was in 1942, if I'm not mistaken, I believe so. And then, of course, at that period in time, it was not like the South Africa that we are living in today. So the historical context will be that, of course, apartheid is going to play a major role. It will have a major role in the book, and also the construction of events will be centered around the inequalities, or if not, the prejudices that were born, if not were as a result of the apartheid system. So it is not only important to understand the setting, but also to understand the historical background, as well as the era in which the book that was published. And so that you know that the events were centered around which time and what was the atmosphere at that time, right? Also, you must be able to assess the words of the characters. How are they saying them? That is what we mean by tone. A tone can be harsh, it can be a pleasant tone, it can be an unpleasant tone, depending on the words of the speaker. So it is, hence I talked earlier about critical reading. So you also check the words of the characters. How are they conveying their messages? Are they using a polite tone? Are they using a harsh tone, right? So the tone determines the how part. And then the theme now, after reading each and everything that is written, everything that is written in literature has a purpose. It means that there is a message, which is a responsibility of you as a reader to extract the message, to say, but then what is the key message of this book? Why was this book written? Why was this short story written? What is central to this short story or novel? What is that can I deduce from the story, as a reader? And then, but before I talk about the main theme, we have what you call the sub-themes. Sub-themes are ideas that helps to build up towards now the climax, which gives us ultimately the main theme. For an example, we may have conflict as a sub-theme, and then we can have a reconciliation as a main theme. Because for us to reconcile, why are we reconciling? It means that we should have fought before. So maybe a certain portion of the novel will represent a sub-theme of conflict, right? Before we can go now into the main theme, which is what? A reconciliation. So sub-themes are small messages that help ultimately to build up to the main message of what? The main message of the novel. These are just basic components that you need to remember. Although in the next video, I will delve deeper into characterization, how to really, really understand what we mean by characterization, because like I've alluded earlier on, that characterization is very important because it helps us to understand the story. Without characters, we do not have a story, right? Now, let us get to the essence, if not the gist, of why I decided to make this video today. I've realized that many learners really do not know how to interact with the literary text that is being used as an exemplar for examination purposes. You assume that ultimately now you have all the answers in the literary text without really knowing the correct methods, if not the correct nuggets on how to interpret a literary text. Now, I've quoted, if not sampled, just a short literary text from the novel Cry the Beloved Country on page 2, and then it reads as follows. The small child ran impotently to the wooden iron church with a letter in her hand. Next to the church was a house, and she knocked timidly on the door. Reverend Stephen Kumalo looked up from the table where he was writing, and he called. And then he called, "Come in," right? The child opened the door carefully and stepped in timidly to an important house, right? Now, let us look and study the linguistics devices, if not linguistics creatives that are used by Alan Python here, who is the author of Pride, the Beloved Country. The small child ran impotently. This child did not just run, but she ran impotently. Why did Alan actually drive our attention in the running of this child? Why is this child driving impotently? Remember, this is now an adverb because it modifies the action that is being performed, which is to run. It tells us how is this child running, and she's running how? Impotently. The reason the writer, who is Ellen Patton, did this was to show us the agency, that it was urgent for this child to run to the house because she had to go there to do what? To bring a letter. So that's why I talked about this is now critical reading. You don't just say the child ran. You focus on linguistic devices that are used by the writer to convey the essence of agency here, to say this child was running how? Importantly. And this is, by the way, an adverb. Now this is paper one, the language part, right? And then now this child is not only running, but is running to the Wood and Iron Church. Why did Ellen feel the need to describe the church? Why didn't she just say this child is just running to the church? Why? It is because by painting a vivid image in our minds as a reader, to understand that the church is made out of wood and iron, right? Now, these are adjectives, words that are used to describe. What kind of church are we talking about? The church that is made out of wood and iron. Why is it important for us as a reader to know that the church was made out of wood and iron? Oh, one, it shows the olden way of living. Now, in the modern way of living, we are no longer building with wood and iron, right? We're using bricks and other materials that I might not really not know about them. But here, if the church is made out of wood and iron, it shows us that it's in a rural area. So of course you expect such structures at that period in time in South Africa, because the setting of this book was set in South Africa, right? It's in a rural area, and then the church is made out of wood and iron. It shows the olden days of living, right? So that is why the writer used adjectives here to give us the sense of the church, but also to help us build a vivid image in our mind so that we can breathe life into the story. Next to the church was a house, and she knocked timidly. It goes back to what I've said earlier on about the use of adverbs to modify the action, to tell us more about how the action is being performed here. This child is knocking timidly. I mean, if you're timid, it means that you don't have confidence, right? She did not just knock for the sake of knocking, but with that sincerity and sensitivity, she knocked how? Timidly. Why is this person knocking timidly? I think towards the end of the extract, we'll understand why is this child knocking timidly to the door. Reverend Stephen Kumalo looked up from the table where he was writing, and he called, "Come in." The small child opened the door carefully. This, I think, correlates with the knocking timidly. So even the door is opened how? Carefully. Again, is an adverb to modify how action is being performed here. But the question in our minds as readers, if you're a critical reader, we need to understand, why is this child knocking so timidly? And then why is she stepping into the house so carefully? Why? We remember, to an important house. Why is this house important within the context of this novel? Because it was a missionary house, right? In a rural area next to a church. And in those days, people really, really respected the church because it's a sacred place, it's a holy place, and as well as a missionary house. So the house is important because it is a missionary house. Hence, all the gestures that are displayed by the child or the girl who is knocking timidly, who is stepping into the house carefully, right? And then remember, the adjectives that are used here, wood and iron church, was to give us also the sense of the kind of lifestyle that they were living in a rural area in the olden days, that the methods of building there, and also somewhere slightly to also show the state of maybe the standard of living. We can safely say that it shows a poor state because it's not a modernly built house. The child ran importantly because she had something important to deliver to Reverend Stephen Khumalo, which is this letter. Hence, then that is how you interact with a literal text when you are given a literal text in an examination. And also not only for examination purposes, but also even when you are reading, that is how you apply critical reading. You study the linguistic devices that are used by the author to bring sense of urgency here. For example, using the word, the adverb importantly was to show the sense of urgency, that it was urgent for that girl to run so that he can go to the missionary house to bring that letter. The description of the church also gives you, as a reader, an idea of a kind of place that people in the setting of the story were located. Also, furthermore, the sincerity of that young girl fearing to even enter the missionary house. It shows also the moral fiber, displayed in the novel, to show that the people from the rural area respected the church and ultimately respected what? The reverend and the missionary house. So that is how you interact literary text. You read, that is what we mean by close reading, critical reading. You check what is that the writer has used to convey ideas. And in most cases, depending, I cannot speak for all the authors because the styles of writing might not be the same, but I believe the skills of reading might be the same, or should be the same for that matter, in a way that you are able to interrogate the text to check how are things described, why are they described in the manner in which they are described. And also, I think what I've just showed you is that before we can even go to literature, we go back to paper one, understand those adjectives, understand those adverbs, understand those also figurative expressions, in order to take all that knowledge now and employ it when you read what your literary text. I hope this one was just short, but very much informative, so that next time when you read, you will be in a position to interact the text accordingly, checking on how the writer has used words and linguistics devices to convey meaning and to convey what? Understanding. Until next time, keep safe and look out for more. Don't forget to do what? To click that subscribe button so that a notification so that you don't miss out when I upload new content. Thank you so much.